Mabel and I are flying solo again today, and we are coming out to the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest, and we're going to take a quick tour around and show you a few things, maybe educate people a little bit, and take advantage of this last day of nice weather. We're supposed to start to see some rain and snow moving into our area as of the time of this recording, and we need to, get out and enjoy the woods a little bit. Had a little bit of an audience there while we were recording that. Some cattle out here grazing in the area. But they moved on. So it's a little gray, quite overcast. Temperatures are in single-digit degrees in Celsius right now. But compared to what the forecast is calling for, this is going to be a nice day. So that's why I wanted to get out and take advantage of it. Now, my suspicion is that the vast majority of the viewers here have never heard of the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest. And I suspect even a few people from this local area have never heard of it. But we are about, 35, 40, 50 kilometers west of Calgary, south of the Trans-Canada Highway, along Highway 68 in the area known as Sibbald Flats. The Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest is mostly a driving loop. There are some places to get out and walk a little bit, but it's a one-way gravel road that kind of winds through the forest and has a number of different interpretive stops along the way, and we're coming up to the first one now. So our first stop along the trip here is in this log building, and that'll kind of give us an overview of the demonstration forest. Really nice views from up on this hill. This is kind of the high point of the demonstration forest loop. Moose Mountain off on the right side of the screen there, and beautiful shot of the sun peeking through the clouds. Now there are a huge number of plaques and interpretive signs inside the little building here. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you by reading all of them, but I'll kind of point out some highlights as I come across them. As usual, I pride myself on our lack of prior research, so I only had the opportunity to do a little bit of searching online, and I found the history of the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest is not a very well-told story. Other than it was developed and opened in 1988 as part of a multi-use land initiative, there's really not a whole lot about it online. This plaque here kind of gives a background of the indigenous history of the area, and including the origin of the name Jumpingpound. And depending on where you see signs or the name written, sometimes it's Jumpingpound one word, sometimes it's Jumpingpound two words. So you'll see that mixed up back and forth, but it is named for the buffalo jumps that were in the area. I've never actually found where the buffalo jumps were in this area, but again, I've never really researched it either. This one here kind of gives us an overview talking about the more European history of Kananaskis, the development of the Eau Claire Lumber Company and the growth there. And, the entire Kananaskis area is very much tied to the history of lumber. The Eau Claire Lumber Company, you'll remember actually, we actually camped at Eau Claire Campground, which is one of the sites of their logging camps. They would float logs down the Kananaskis River, down the Bow River, right to the Eau Claire Lumber Mill, which was located where downtown Calgary is today, and Prince's Island Park is named for Peter Prince, one of the founders of the Eau Claire Lumber Company. And Peter Prince's house can actually be found in Heritage Park in Calgary. Now, if you followed the channel for any length of time, you know we spend a lot of time in Kananaskis Country, area established in the late 1970s, basically to become a recreation area for the people of Alberta. This sign here actually says the demonstration forest was created in 1987. The online sources say 1988, so somewhere in that late 80s period. According to this sign here, the lodgepole pine was declared Alberta's provincial tree in 1984. If I was asked that on a trivia quiz, that would probably have been my guess, but I don't think I really actually knew that Alberta's provincial tree was the lodgepole pine. And I don't know if you pause the video, if you can read this with the way the sun's coming through there, but it says, just as you must consider wildlife when planning your hikes through Kananaskis Country, so to industries that are working in the forest. And that's a very big factor in why I'm here today. Being a solo day, you know, I wanted to hike and be out in the woods and take advantage of the weather, but I don't like hiking solo anymore as I get older, and that's mainly for one reason: bears. I'm horribly backlit in this shot, but I just wanted to let you have a look there at Moose Mountain in the background one last time before we leave the forestry kiosk area here and take off down the road a bit further and look at some of the other sites along the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest. Too bad I didn't do this earlier in the year when the leaves would have been out. There would have been a lot more color to see, but that's okay. I still enjoy this time of year out in the woods. Now, one thing I've never been accused of being is over mature, but this forest is over mature. And seems to be typical with so many interpretive signs when you're out in the woods. Somebody had to put some bullet holes in it, but basically this sign's just kind of talking about how when a forest is not managed, either through selective harvesting or through natural occurrences such as wildfires, and they're allowed to become too old and too mature, you often start to see a loss of the productivity. Disease and the aging trees tend to suffer. Sorry, just was listening to the squirrel there. Tend to suffer as the forest ages if it's not being renewed in some manner. So next stop here, we're going to go down and look at a recreated sawmill, basically from the 1950s era. But we just got to follow this little hiking trail here, and Mabel's already very anxious to lead the way. She's been being a bit of a pain today as she's very excited to be out here. This sign here is talking about how this stand of timber was harvested in 1956, but they only took down trees that were bigger than 12 inches in diameter, and that left about 60% of the timber standing. The downside was that by leaving behind many of the smaller trees, they were often inferior and left less than ideal conditions for the forest to regenerate itself. Here's another bullet-riddled sign talking about how this is similar to the sort of portable sawmill that would have been in operation here back in 1956. At the time, this was an active logging area. Here's a look at the sign that kind of shows some of the pieces, and we'll look at the actual equipment here in a moment, but it's talking about how they don't know exactly when this sawmill was manufactured, but it was overhauled in 1958, was used in the Cypress Hills Park, which is another place we've visited on the channel. And in 1987, the Spray Lake Sawmills of Cochrane reassembled it for display here in the demonstration forest. I am certainly no expert on logging or how any of this really works, and I'm not going to go into great detail for that reason. Plus, I doubt you really want me to get into the nitty-gritty of how all of this is assembled and works together, because if I did that, this video would probably be like 3 hours long. Now, my personal history with the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest, take a drink every time I say that, dates back to 2005, and I found it through geocaching, of course, of all things. But one thing I've never done in the number of times I've visited here is to actually walk a little bit further away from the Sawmill down this little trail here to another set of interpretive signs. A little bit of discussion here about the modern or more modern forestry practices and how they make efforts to preserve stands of trees. And you can see here how they cut and then skid, then load onto trucks and move to a modern sawmill. And then after the harvest, how they begin the regeneration process. So they expose patches of soil that provides growing site for seedlings in a process called scarification. I'm assuming that's how it is, not scarification, but I'm going to call it scarification. And they use specially made teeth for this purpose. And if I turn around behind me, here is, with Mabel in the shot, a look at a couple of those Hensley Ripper teeth that they use for scarification of spruce areas. Next stop is talking about forest rangelands. So this sign here, and you can pause the video if you want to read it in more details, just talking about how there's these grassy areas that are often found on the south-facing slopes, and how they provide important areas for food and shelter for both domesticated and wild animals, and talks about grazing cattle. So there are two sections to the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest loop. There's a north loop and a south loop. We've just completed the north loop. Now we cross over Highway 68 and we start back through the south loop. Another section talking about regeneration and scarification. Why do I keep calling it that? I think it's scarification because you're kind of scarring the land. I'm going to go with scarification from now on if it comes up. But talking about that, this area here was the pine was reseeded after the harvest, and then the aspen kind of grew naturally, I guess, in this area. This is going back, this site was harvested in 1987. Get a little bit of an idea, 1987, as much as I hate to think about it, was 35 years ago, but it gives you an idea of how the forest has regrown since then. And a look at some of these large chain-like spiky objects that they use in preparing the land to regenerate the forest. We now come to one of my personal favorite parts of the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest loop, and that is the wetland trail. And this leads out into a wetland, and it's just super peaceful, super quiet, especially on a day like today where it's a weekday and there's not a lot of other people around here. This is just a great spot when you want some quiet time in the woods to reconnect with nature. And here we are, we've made it to the boardwalk. It's funny, it's so quiet here. I feel like I have the urge to just whisper. I cannot tell you how nice that felt just to sit there and enjoy some silence. A couple birds came by to check out Mabel and I. Felt our first couple drops of rain, so hopefully that holds off long enough. I think I'm about 3/4 of the way done the loop here. But I think everyone needs the opportunity to get away from the noise of the modern day world and reconnect with basic nature. And it's kind of funny to say that, given that I'm using the internet and a platform like this to say that, but it's true. And I feel it every once in a while, whether it's camping or hiking or even doing a drive through the mountains and just stopping to have a lunch somewhere. Every once in a while, the feeling just becomes the mountains are calling and I must respond. Even though we're not at the end of the loop officially, I think this is a great place to wrap the video up. And this sign, I think, says it really well. One forest, many users. And we've seen that on our trip around the loop. Is we have seen, the history of logging, we have seen recreational uses, we've seen just driving for fun and checking things out. And as it says here, hidden in behind the spot here that we can't see through the trees, there's a natural gas site. So it's very fitting, I think, to stop here with all the different uses. We've seen the different areas of the forest. We've seen the different types of trees, some birds, some squirrels, no other real wildlife, but it seems like a appropriate place. Plus, after having the quiet time there back at the wetlands, it's really hard to get my mind back into the filmmaking mindset. So I'm just coming up here on the little, I don't know what it's officially called, but I always call it the Jumpingpound Loop picnic area. Gonna stop there. If there's no one around, I may throw the drone up and get a few landscape shots, but if there is somebody around, I won't do that so I don't disturb them. So on behalf of Mabel and myself, Emily had to work today, so that's why we're flying solo. I just want to say again, thank you very much for coming along on the trip with us. Hope you enjoyed the ride, and thank you for your support through commenting, liking, subscribing, all that good YouTube stuff. It's been really great to see the community here grow with a lot of like-minded individuals who really enjoy seeing the sort of things that we try and bring you here on the DroneOCan.com YouTube channel. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode. Now, it's too bad I didn't do this tour a little bit earlier in the year. Oh my. Earlier in the year. Wow. It's a very rough road.